New York City's mayor has been indicted. You can see the banner on the bottom of your screen. No, this isn't a drill. So here's what we can tell you. The indictment is sealed. We don't know what the charges are, but you have probably heard a lot of headlines about the New York City mayor and his top administrators all being under a cloud of suspicion and investigation over the last year. Last November, agents even pulled him aside on the street and pushed away his security detail. Think about that for a minute. New York City's mayor is on the streets of New York, and his security detail is moved away from him so that agents could seize his electronic devices, his phones. That was a massive headline. I thought it was more recent, but it was November. So the feds have had his phones for a very long time. Then, one by one, members of his administration had their phones seized, some houses raided, and the investigation got deeper and deeper. It's now sort of up to like 4 investigations. And that's just to name that off the top of my head. This one tonight is yielded from the FBI investigation of the mayor himself. There's the U.S. Attorney investigation of his deputy mayors, school chancellor, special assistant to the mayor about contracts over migrant services that were allegedly funneled to friends and associates. There's the investigation into the police commissioner. The police commissioner and his twin brother allegedly shaking down nightclubs around New York City regarding protection. There is another investigation into foreign influence. That involved the U.S. attorney in Brooklyn. Possibly that there's alleged influence recruiting in the mayor's highest senior official positions, China in particular. There's been discussion of the Turkish consulate and that there may have been some push by the mayor to get the fire commissioner to approve fire standards in a faster pace for the Turkish consulate, and possibly quid pro quo alleged that the mayor may have received some special gifts from the Turks because of that, whether it was airplane tickets or seats or other perks. And that expands to an even further investigation of other nations that may be involved in this international investigation, including Israel and China and South Korea and Uzbekistan and others. So just a cloud of investigation for the last year, and one by one, people dropping out of his administration, resigning, including even his top legal counselor just had resigned recently. Our Kelly Meyer at the White House gave me a quick heads up to tell me that the president is supposed to be landing soon at the White House and will be stepping off Marine One. Obviously, the press corps is going to want to know if the president will have anything to say or if he'll even stop for any questions, because Mayor Adams was with the president tonight. They were at a reception. You know, it's the UN week in New York, so all the biggest world leaders are in New York City, and the president was here. Mayor Adams was at a reception tonight, not just with President Biden, but also with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and with the National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, a.k.a. spokesman, John Kirby. And then Chief Humanitarian and Chef Jose Andres was there as well. So President Biden's supposed to be getting back to the White House. We're getting our cameras trained to see if when he steps off Marine One, if he will just bypass the reporters and their questions, or if he will stop to make a comment. I am more than certain that the president was briefed on this one, because the federal government does not arrest the mayor of the largest city, the 110th mayor of the largest city in the nation. Not arrest, but indict. The arrest likely, we're told, is to be a surrender, a coordinated surrender, a negotiated surrender, and an appearance tomorrow before a magistrate. All of this is just such a shock. I mean, a week ago, I was talking to you about Diddy being indicted, and then the feds swooped in and said, no, that negotiated surrender, no. They came in a week earlier and you know, took Diddy into custody and booked him into the MDC in Brooklyn. Metropolitan Detention Center. That's where the federal inmates are locked up. I'm not going to suggest for a minute that that's what's going to happen to the mayor. To my knowledge, even though the indictment is sealed, we don't think that the charges are violent. That's for sure. This is a corruption investigation. And so if there is processing tomorrow after his appearance before the magistrate, where you just heard earlier, the process would be he would go through pre-trial protocols, and that is being fingerprinted and booked, photographed, more than likely a mugshot, but that won't be released, and then more than likely bonding out. So it's kind of the same thing if you remember former President Trump, when he was indicted and brought in Georgia. It was basically in one door, out the other. And then the process took its course. And that's usually what happens with high-ranking federal politicians. And these are not the kinds of charges where there's violence involved. So it is a whole other kettle of fish. Now, that doesn't mean that the feds wouldn't be concerned about flight risk and witness tampering. That was something we heard in Diddy's case, right? The reason that P. Diddy couldn't sway the federal government to release him on bail, even though he offered up a $50 million bond, was that the feds believed he was too risky, that he might try to corrupt witnesses, that P. Diddy, if he were released on his own recognizance, even under a house monitoring situation, an ankle bracelet, et cetera, even with the promises he wouldn't see any females other than his mothers of his children and his attorneys, they believed that there was too much risk for P. Diddy in releasing him, that he would corrupt the witnesses. He would try to tamper with that case. Would that happen with the mayor of New York City? I have no idea. It would be just another cascading seismic headline if that were the case. But my suspicion is that he will be released after an appearance with the magistrate tomorrow. But the passport issue is interesting as well. That he would likely have to surrender his passport. Whether that's already happened in a negotiated surrender or whether that would happen tomorrow would not be unusual for a person under a federal indictment to have to surrender a passport. No idea what the charges are, so I can't even tell you what the potential exposure is for a sentence. That is also really important when you're talking about bail. If you're being told that you likely won't walk out of jail again, or you leave with a toe tag based on your age and the sentencing, that's also impetus for someone to flee. Again, one of the most recognizable people in the world, but I said that about Diddy. So again, huge headlines. Do the federal government investigators have witnesses and people who are prepared to flip, people who will allege that they witnessed crimes being committed by the New York City mayor? Let me tell you one thing. They would not indict a man of this stature if they did not have goods. The feds don't work that way. They have a 98% conviction rate, and I may be off by a few points there, so forgive me. Sometimes it changes, but let me tell you, they don't get things wrong very often, and they don't move forward with cases unless they pretty much know they can win. I personally do know of people who have beaten the federal government in their indictments through trial. I do know that it has happened. I know people personally, but typically someone at this level, it has got to be a very serious case that they have mounted against him. This is the first sitting mayor in New York City's history to be indicted while in office, the 110th mayor of New York City. I have said it before. I will say it again. It is important. The mayor is vehemently denying this. He is responding to those calling for him to resign. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.